driving the conversation, making sense of the news.
Welcome to this episode of Making Sense of the News with me, Njideka Maduka. In this episode, we're making sense of President Tinubu's second-year anniversary speech. Now, as expected, May 29 marked 2 years of President Bola Tinubu in office, and we're treated to an anniversary speech. I personally like to look into the speeches of our leaders because, as the saying goes, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. It gives me the opportunity to know what's going on in their minds and how they perceive things. To start with, I've come to appreciate the thematic posture President Tinubu's speeches have taken because it helps us to deal with one particular issue at a given time. This is different from the time of his predecessor, Muhammadu Buhari, when issues were lumped together in his speeches. It was almost difficult to distinguish an anniversary speech from a Democracy Day speech or any other speech for that matter. But under the current administration, I expected the President's next speech on June 12, which was Democracy Day, to reflect the administration's achievements as far as democratic ethos were concerned. And it did just that, just as his second-year anniversary speech was an opportunity to reel out his achievements in the various sectors. Having said that, taking a critical look at the President's speech, one message was clearly being projected, which was, we are making progress, or the administration's reforms are working. But for the average Nigerian, how true is this claim? I was reading a report on the preparations for the recently concluded summer celebrations, and one thing was common among the traders: complaints. Complaints of low sales because the cow, which cost about 150,000 naira last year, now costs about 250,000 naira. One trader said there was no longer 150,000 naira cow this year. Now, President Tinubu started his administration with two key bold reforms, which are the removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of the exchange rate. In articulating the achievements of his government over the past 2 years, the President in his speech mentioned these two reforms, just as he had always done at any given opportunity, as a key achievement of his government, saying that these two were recipes for what he called fiscal crisis that would have caused inflation and other things. In the next paragraph of that speech, the President noted that despite the rise in the cost of living, the country has made undeniable progress, while inflation has begun to ease, with rice prices and other staples declining. Now, it's not clear if the President was trying to say that the removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of the exchange rate was responsible for easing inflation and reducing the prices of food staples like rice. But I found that statement interesting. Now, I'm not the type to go to the market and price a bag of rice or buy a bag of rice, but that claim really got me thinking, has the price of rice actually dropped? Curious, I went digging, and what I found was quite revealing. First off, one of the most common explanations I came across, especially in reports quoting S&P Global, was this: between April and May 2025, especially that period, there was a drop in the price of rice due to supply glut. Here's how it happened. India, one of the world's largest rice producers, had earlier imposed export restrictions, including a 20% export duty on certain types of rice like broken white rice and parboiled rice. But when India reversed that policy, it triggered a wave of rice exports, causing prices to ease globally. And yes, That ripple effect reached us here in Nigeria. The result? A bag of rice, 50 kg, dropped to as low as 58,000 naira in some parts of the country, largely thanks to a surge in rice imports coming in through our neighbor, Benin Republic. So if anything, it was India's policy reversal that played a bigger role in that price drop. Now there is more. Another report traced the reduction in price of rice to what you would call demand-driven price reduction. In plain terms, people simply weren't buying as much rice as they would want to because they couldn't afford it. Nigeria's purchasing power has taken a nosedive, or if they didn't mind buying rice at a high price during festive period, after the celebrations, demand just nosedived. And it also turns out that the price of rice depended on the type of rice, because not all rice is created equal. The kind of rice you're buying matters too. For example, local short-grain rice, which tends to absorb more water and cook faster, saw a more noticeable drop in prices, going from around 68,000 naira to about 60,000 naira for a 50 kg bag. But if you're shopping for long-grain rice, especially premium brands, those still sold at a premium price, some as high as 90,000 naira per bag. That's still way up. Even market surveys from April, like the one by the Daily Post, showed that prices in Kubwa and Dusi markets in Abuja ranged from 81,000 naira to 115,000 naira for different brands and grades of rice. So clearly, while there may have been a drop in some cases, it wasn't uniform across the board. Now here is something really interesting I found as well. In April, a report by Punch newspaper revealed that rice prices briefly went down, some as low as 54,000 naira per 50 kg bag. And the reason? Rumors. Yes, you heard right. Rumors of deadly rice. Apparently, there were viral messages going around, especially on WhatsApp, claiming that people had died after consuming contaminated rice in places like Badagry in Lagos and Idiroko in Ogun State. Out of fear, people just stopped buying, and naturally, when demand dropped, so did the price. Finally, let's talk about what Nairametrics found in their May edition of the Food Price Watch. They pointed to factors like better regional harvests, less hoarding, and a temporary drop in fuel and logistics costs as reasons for the price decline. But even the analysts in their report were quick to point out that prices are still vulnerable to the usual suspects, which are seasonal changes and larger economic stability. Now, what is worth noting here in all of this is that despite all the theories and explanations, not a single credible report links the recent drop in rice prices directly to the president's twin policies of subsidy removal and exchange rate unification, even when analysts mentioned lower fuel and logistics costs. The key question is, to what extent did that really help? And more importantly, how does today's rice price compare with what it was before the Tinubu administration came in? So yes, rice prices may have dropped in some areas, but before we start handing out credit, it's important to ask, what's really driving these changes? Apparently, the cost of fuel is still high compared to the period prior to May 29, 2023. Now the question to ask, when are fuel prices going to go back to what they were before May 29, 2023? And to be honest, that's a valid concern because we all know how closely fuel prices are tied to almost everything in this country. Transportation depends on fuel, and when transport goes up, businesses don't just absorb the heat, they pass it on to the consumers, and so prices rise across the board. It's a ripple effect that just keeps spreading. So what's the Tinubu administration really doing to address this? Yes, the Dangote Refinery has officially come on stream, and you would expect that local refining would finally bring some relief. But so far, the benefits haven't trickled down. Even when we hear announcements about price cuts, the man on the street isn't seeing it. Why? Because the final price of fuel is too high, and the burden remains on consumers. Let's not forget the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL. There was so much hope pinned on the revitalized Port Harcourt refinery. But what have we seen? Not much. In fact, the refinery recently shut down for maintenance, and I asked myself when I got the news, maintenance of what exactly? What has it produced so far? Now let's go to the issue of Forex unification. The government claimed it will help stabilize the economy and ease inflation, especially on imported goods. But look around. The naira to dollar gap is too wide, and prices of everyday goods remain high. We are still a heavily import-dependent nation, and that's a huge part of the problem. Now, when it comes to crude oil production, the one thing that could have really helped boost our foreign reserves, we're still not where we should be, really. Oil theft and pipeline vandalism continue to cripple the sector. The president one time said we are aiming for 2 million barrels a day by 2027, not next year, 2027. And I wondered to myself, are we truly serious about turning things around? If we can just tackle oil theft with the urgency it deserves, we could hit that target in a much shorter time, even this year. Look, some of the economic policies or reforms like removing the fuel subsidy and unifying the exchange rate were necessary. They were steps towards fighting long-standing corruption in the system. But what's missing is the impact these moves were supposed to make. So, if these impacts are not felt, what then is the president attributing to the price reduction in rice and other staples? Just as one frustrated consumer told Nairametrics, let me quote her or him, even when the price of rice goes down, it doesn't make much difference because everything else is going up, end quote. And that's really the point. Some prices are dropping, but not because anything is changed policy-wise. At the same time, other things are getting more expensive for totally different reasons. So it's not like we're seeing the effects of great economic decisions. It's more about other forces at play in different parts of the market. For example, it's almost difficult to buy pepper for 200 naira, contrary to before. There was also a time it was easy to get 500 naira worth of potatoes. But recently, it's difficult to get the market women to sell at such a price. Meanwhile, pumpkin leaves, which is ugu, which came in small sizes at the price of 200 naira from late last year, now come in big sizes, albeit at 200 naira, given there was a time the commodity was sold at 100 naira. There was a time tomato was expensive, but 500 naira can now buy a reasonable amount of tomatoes. Improvements in prices have also been linked to seasonal harvests. In the end, fluctuations in prices remain due to various factors. So, while we wait for those big economic moves to translate into real stability, other factors are still driving up prices and they need to be addressed fast. Take insecurity, for example. The president in his speech said security was improving, especially in the northwest. But people on the ground are still living in fear. Notorious bandits like Tuji Bello are reportedly still roaming free. And what about Benue, the food basket of the nation? Ongoing violence there is not just tragic, it's threatening national food supply. If we can't secure places like Benue, we can forget about stabilizing food prices. Then there is the issue within the security sector itself. There was a report I came across recently, and it alleged supply of arms to criminals by rogue officers. These stories are not new. They have become too common for us to ignore them. A serious, transparent audit of our security agencies and personnel is long overdue. And let's talk about coordination in government or lack of it. Economic policies can't exist in silos. Ministries need to work together because everything is connected. If there is a bumper harvest in one area, what's being done to make sure it continues in the next season, especially in areas bedeviled by insecurity? What about the roads? Are they good enough to transport food efficiently? Are corrupt middlemen being taken care of? What about fuel prices and transportation costs? What about the Forex crisis? Electricity? All of these things will need to be dealt with. The Central Bank of Nigeria might say its monetary policies are easing inflation. Maybe they are, but on paper, it doesn't mean much when everyday Nigerians are still being squeezed by cost push factors that no one is addressing. So here's the big question. Will the government finally connect the dots and see how every ministry, every decision, every policy affects the lives of ordinary Nigerians? The president, in his anniversary speech, listed economic wins like GDP growth, higher revenue, improved foreign reserves, and reduced deficits. And yes, those are positive signs. But let's be real, most Nigerians aren't feeling them. He also talked about investments in education, health, solid minerals, oil and gas, agriculture, electricity, and those efforts are commendable. But right now, what Nigerians need most is an increase in purchasing power. People are struggling to afford even 1 square meal a day. That's the reality. Whatever the government is doing, it must prioritize addressing hunger and restoring dignity to the daily life of Nigerians. Everything else can follow. That's it on this episode of Making Sense of the News with me, Njideka Maduka. So tell me, what do you make of President Tinubu's second-year anniversary speech? Did it address your concerns or it didn't? Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, if you found this episode insightful, don't forget to share it and follow me for more. You can listen and connect with me across platforms: Spreaker, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, and the rest of them via linktree.ee/Njideka Maduka. If you're also interested in talking about national issues, or you're a resource person who would like his views to be felt, feel free to reach out. Email me at njidekamadka2015@gmail.com. Let's make sense of the news together, one headline at a time. Thank you for tuning in. Catch you in the next episode.
Driving the conversation, making sense of the news.